This is Intelligence Matters.
I'm host Michael Allen with Beacon Global Strategies. In late February, I spoke to Nico Lange to discuss the results of Germany's federal parliamentary elections and developments in Ukraine. The episode was recorded before President Trump and Zelensky met at the White House to discuss the proposed U.S.-Ukraine mineral agreement, which was not immediately signed. As such, our discussion reflects the anticipation and speculation surrounding the deal at that time. Mr. Lange is a non-resident senior fellow with the Transatlantic Defense and Security Program at the Center for European Policy Analysis. He is also a senior fellow at the Munich Security Conference and teaches military history at the University of Potsdam. His research centers on the Russian war in Ukraine, new defense technologies, and cybersecurity. Stay with us for our conversation with Nico Lange. Nico Lange, thank you so much for joining us tonight from Berlin, your time, to tell us about the recent German elections.
Yeah, hello, Michael. Thank you for having me, and sorry for starting a bit late. Berlin is a flur of late meetings these days.
I understand. Well, first, give us the rundown on the election. You're a foreign policy hand from the CDU and have served your country bravely. It feels like it was a big victory for the CDU. At least you got a plurality of the vote, but tell us briefly about the outcome.
Yeah, I think it was about time for the government to change. But and if the government would have changed faster, that would have even been better. So not having a government in this period of time feels especially difficult for Europe, but also for the transatlantic relationship and of course for domestic German issues. The result of the elections is a win for the CDU, CSU, but not a very strong mandate for Friedrich Merz. I mean, he will be chancellor, but he has below 30% in the federal elections. Above 30 would have been better for the negotiations. He has a very strong CSU with a much better result for the CSU in Bavaria. So he has to, I think, accommodate them when it comes to the coalition and the negotiations for portfolios. And of course, there's only one coalition partner. There are no options. Because of the election result, it can only be a majority formed with the SPD, who are now without Olaf Scholz, of course, and will find a new constellation. But still, I mean, everybody understands the negotiation position. If your result is not as good as it needed to be and you only have one option, it will be tough to negotiate, and it will give the SPD a strong hand in the negotiations. That's the situation. Friedrich Merz has declared he has the ambition to form a government quickly. Let's see if, under what I described, with this weaker result and weaker mandate, this is a possibility. And one of the things he surprised many with immediately after the election is that he said he wants to talk to the old parliament that will still formally be able to convene for the next 3 weeks or so about a new special fund for defense, because in the old parliament there is a two-third majority, a constitutional majority to do this, while in the new parliament there's a blocking minority of the AfD and Die Linke, a left party, who are not allowing for a constitutional majority. So there are two processes going on at the same time now. Negotiations about a possible modification of the Sondervermögen, the special fund, to have additional money for defense in accordance with the constitution, and the coalition talks that will start. Both processes are going on at the same time now.
Great. We'll get to the defense fund soon. But first, let me just ask you, the CDU got a plurality of the vote, of course, but is there any handicap or forecast? Do you think the CDU in the coalition government will have maybe the foreign policy arms of the German government or the ministries, and the SPD will have maybe domestic ministries? How do you anticipate? Because where I'm going is I want to hear about the new chancellor's foreign policy, national security views.
Yeah, I think it's of course early in the process to talk about this, but I think if we see the compass of Friedrich Merz if we take what he said before in foreign policy speeches during the campaign, I think there is a will by the CDU/CSU to control the foreign and security policy, and not only via the Chancellor's office, maybe doing something that has not been done in German history for a long time, taking the Chancellery and the Foreign Office, because usually the Foreign Office is taken by the coalition partner. That is something that is discussed here in Berlin. And it seems that it is more likely than ever that for the first time a National Security Council will be created that will be able to give foreign policy guidelines through all the other ministries. And that would be something that is much needed for Germany. And there have been discussions about this for quite some time, but it would be a great success if this could finally be established. And that would be an improvement to German foreign policy.
So, understandably, many in Europe are upset about what they perceive as maybe the United States going a different path, certainly since the Munich Security Conference. But nonetheless, I was struck a little bit by the new Chancellor Designate's views on independence from Trump's America and the warning that NATO may soon be dead. Could you sort of describe what he said there? I saw others, especially folks associated with the Munich Security Conference, sort of say he's a very pro the transatlantic relationship, but give us some sense of where he is on this critical question and where you think Germany will be once a government is formed.
Well, I think Friedrich Merz is known as a staunch transatlanticist, as somebody who was leading the Atlantic Brücke, somebody who already also in his business life had many contacts and many friends in the United States. So there's, I think, no doubt about his compass being a strong European and a strong transatlanticist at the same time. I think he has an understanding that if the negotiation talk is tough, you also have to be tough, and that you will be taken seriously if you have a strong position and you defend your position. It's certainly better than whining and complaining. That's how I understood his direction of building a strong Europe, and if necessary, being responsible and even independent from the United States. I understand this more as a negotiation reaction to if you want to have a friendly interpretation, to the start of negotiations that was presented at the Munich Security Conference by the United States of America. We did not hear much about American foreign and security policy at the Munich Security Conference. It was a speech about something else. So I think the question is still out there, how to shape the priorities and how to work together. But certainly the timeline at the moment is not in Merz's favor, because he will need some time to finally become chancellor and to start official talks with the US government, and things will be happening from now to end of April or beginning of May. But if you see the agenda on energy, on digital regulation, on security guarantees for Ukraine, on US force posture in Europe, maybe it's good to start with a tough negotiation to achieve some results later. So I would not interpret this as a departure from transatlantic convictions. It's more a posture in negotiations that are coming.
Well, that makes sense. Trump respects power. I've read so much since Munich that we're in a true transatlantic crisis at the moment. Is that where Europe is now that we've had a little separation from the Munich weekend? Or do you think we're still in a state of crisis?
There are many facets to this, but I think I personally was surprised that many Europeans were surprised in Munich.
Mm,
I mean, you know that I've been following this closely. I went to the convention. I was in Washington during the first Trump presidency. I know many people, and or at least had some exchange with them. So the Europeans did not use the time at the end of Biden and the transition from Biden to Trump to prepare. And that is surprising to me because it was expectable what was happening. I think the argument would have been stronger if the Europeans would already spend 3% on defense and if they would already do more for Ukraine, if they would match what the US is doing on the military side in Europe. The whole argument would be easier. And now you have this totally unfriendly sound. But at the core of it, there is truth to the argument, as it was in previous US administrations.
hmm
I think what many people perceived, I mean, the Munich crowd, what many people who are transatlanticists by profession, what they perceived irritating was that the speech was not about foreign and security policy and US interest and US priorities at all.
Right.
But that was what people wanted to talk about, also with the Trump administration. Find common interest, work together on solving issues, maybe aligning on practical terms when it comes to countering China. And unfortunately, the character of the speech did not allow such a conversation.
Yeah, you're right. It would have been better if we had been able to talk about China, among other things.
And by the way, the Chinese were very happy about how this went down.
Oh, I bet.
And I heard from somebody from the Chinese delegation saying, look, we did not attract attention to ourselves because there's a Chinese saying, you stand on the river and you watch it burn on the other side.
Mm,
And is that really what we want to do with China? Yeah, to
yeah.
present ourselves in this way in front of our adversary. I have my doubts about this.
Well, I know Macron, when he was here a few days ago, said to Trump, don't terrify us. We should work together on the Chinese. So
Yeah.
I understand that sentiment. Let me ask you about the defense fund, because I thought it was very good politics for Keir Starmer to announce 2 days before his arrival here in Washington, and he's giving a joint press conference with Donald Trump today. He announced that the UK would increase their defense spending to 2.5% of GDP.
Mm-hmm.
Now, there's a lot of skepticism online about it just covering up some holes in the UK military and the rest, but nonetheless, it seems like a bona fide attempt to spend more on defense. Tell us about your new chancellor, or soon to be new chancellor's position on a defense fund. What is it? How much will be in it? And what will it go to?
Well, the practical consideration is to say, let's use the old parliament because the constitutional majority can be built there to change the current Sondervermögen, the special fund for the armed forces, from 100 billion that is in there as a sum into something else, let's say 300 billion. And that would add 200 billion more to German defense spending over the next years. And depending on how much you spend per year, you can up from 2% that you have now to 2.5 or even to 3. But it will only be a limited solution because it's no structural change to the budget. It's just an on top special fund. But it certainly will help through the next years. I think Merz has the consideration to focus on growth for the first time in a long time, have a government that is strongly focusing on growth so that you have to cover higher defense spending with a special fund for the next 1, 2, maybe 3 years. And after that, you can finance more defense spending from the revenue you get from having growth in the economy. And I think this growth focus is very much needed for Germany. Unfortunately, during the campaign, there was, for my taste, not enough talk about economy and growth. It in the end turned out to be very much about migration, also because of terrorist incidents we had in Germany that channeled the attention there. So that's the overall idea. It's a tricky question whether this will succeed or not, but certainly it will be perceived well in NATO if Germany gets around this defense question, and at least for the next years to come, will spend solidly more than 2% of its GDP on defense. The US can overdo it with making this point, though, because I heard many in Munich and after Munich saying, yes, okay, the Europeans heard the message, they will spend more on defense now, but they will spend it European now. Because they are asking themselves the question, can the United States of America be trusted? Can we buy weapons there, and are we allowed to use them as we want? Will there be restrictions? So that's a whole new element to this, because I think before Munich, I would say from higher European defense spending, there would be also a significant number of US companies profiting from that because of the production capabilities. But now there's stronger talk about spending the European money only on European industry.
Okay, well, that was what I was going to ask you. Okay, so there's one point there that needs to be eventually decided. Do you know, however, is this to build up German capability, or is it also about transferring new weapons to Ukraine?
No, this is about building German capability. I think when it comes to Ukraine, there will be, on the European level, there will be significant movement to invest more into the Ukrainian industry and defense sector, because Ukraine already now is covering 40% of its battlefield needs by Ukrainian industry. And they are only at below 50% of their capacity. So investing into the Ukrainian defense industry could help greatly, and I think the European Union will go into that. When it comes to German capacity building, if Germany gets a new Sondervermögen and additional spending, I think it will be spent differently than the first 100 billion were spent. The first 100 billion, it was more a log jam of old projects you had unfinanced, more from the past. I think new money, it will be more on drones, autonomous systems, command and control, satellite capabilities, battlefield connectivity. It will be more future oriented, of course, also driven by the experience on the battlefield on Ukraine, but it will be less around big platforms. Yeah, the last Sondervermögen was F-35, heavy transport helicopter, and a lot of ammunition. I think now it's more about the more advanced technology procurement that you need to make.
Well, I think this will be received well in Washington. It'll be great to maybe have a reason to stop the newspaper articles about Germany's soldiers and inability to fill out ranks and the rest. Nico,
Yeah.
in addition to, and I will come back to the terrorist attacks and how the AFD performed in the election, but let's go to Ukraine, because in addition to your deep expertise on your nation's politics, I know you know very closely and follow very closely what's going on in the war in Ukraine.
Yeah.
Lately, I think the verdict has been that the Russians are making territorial gains, not grand, gigantic sweeps, but nonetheless steadily taking village by village. Can you update us? What is the status of how things are going there? Who's winning and who's losing?
Yeah, and before I do that, if you allow, Michael, I will do a parenthesis about tomorrow, because that's happening in Washington, D.C.,
Yes.
because I think it will be a success for Ukraine and for the United States of America tomorrow to sign the resource agreement, and to have Zelensky meeting President Trump before President Trump meets with Putin, which might happen at some point. And I think that's good. And it was a difficult way. I mean, the negotiations started in a difficult tone, and now there is an agreement, and both sides have worked on it, and I think it will be a success for Trump and for Zelensky and for the Ukrainian-US relationship. And that's remarkable, because 10 days ago it looked like it would be extremely difficult, and now there will be the signing tomorrow. That's good.
Yes.
On the battlefield situation, it's true what you say. Russia is slowly progressing, and what should make us all think also about when we think about European security is that Russia believes that an approach since October 23, where you lose 800 to 1,000 soldiers per day, 800 to 1,000 per day, that this approach is a road to success. I mean, it says something about Russia and about the Russian armed forces, but it's also a big challenge if we consider this our enemy. So we are dealing with an enemy here who is considering 800 to 1,000 losses per day a success road. That's a big challenge for us. My interpretation is that this is a part of a long-term military planning to slowly but steadily advance in Ukraine. I see no indication on the battlefield that Russia is planning a ceasefire, needs a stop, wants a stop, or anything of that sort. And I do not think that what for now is known as methods by the Trump administration to put pressure on Putin will lead to a change of trajectory. Because I have my doubts if the energy prices can be brought down quickly to a level that will make Putin consider a ceasefire or a departure from his maximum goals. Battlefield pressure is nothing the US seem to think about at the moment. So my baseline is I think the war will continue in this slow and grinding on fashion, and the Russians will continue attacking even if there should be a meeting of Putin and Trump or further talks between the US and Russia. The Russia will continue attacking all the way. And the Ukrainians are not doing great, but it certainly is also not a catastrophe. They can also do this. They are slowly losing ground, but they are administering heavy losses to the Russians. They can also do this for the time being. So I see no quick move to ceasefire on the battlefield.
Yeah, let me ask you about the time being, as you said. So I agree with you, 800 to 1,000 per day. That was astonishing. But the conventional wisdom seems to be here that the Russians have beaten the sanctions, if for no other reason that the Chinese are bailing them out, that they have, quote unquote, unlimited number of personnel that they'll eventually impress onto the battlefield, that their economy, while strained and sure to have long-term negative effects for now, has shifted over to a wartime economy. So it looks bleak, at least people are arguing, and therefore, of course, we need to move towards forcing a ceasefire or a peace deal. What's the sentiment in Europe about just how long Russia can go without really running out of gas?
Well, I think in the way they are doing this now, they can go for a long time, with the result that they will take village by village of Ukraine, beginning from the southeast. I think it will be more on the attention of everybody if, let's say, in 10 months from now, they are taking the city of Pokrovsk. If in 1 year from now, they're trying to move towards Kramatorsk and Slovyansk, or even to the city of Zaporizhia. But that's very slow progress. And Putin might be profiting if this war will be normalized and marginalized in the sense that it's not at the center of attention of everybody. Everybody will be busy with other stuff and maybe also with the war in Ukraine. That's for Putin a chance to slowly grind on. If you want to bring this to a halt because of this situation, you need to apply pressure on Putin. And the Ukrainians, and I think the Ukrainians are right on this one, they believe financial and economic pressure will not be enough. There needs to be military pressure by equipping the Ukrainians with the tools to apply military pressure to the Russian forces on the ground. And maybe now that they are around Pokrovsk and where they are around Pokrovsk at the moment culminating, there would be a good time to apply pressure. And we have seen by the Kursk offensive that it's possible to achieve something there. So that, I think that's the one of the conflicts the Ukrainians are having with the US is the question whether financial and economic pressure will be enough for Putin, or if it needs military pressure as well. I'm with the Ukrainians here. And on the long-term security, and I think Zelensky is right saying I cannot enter negotiations if the long-term security question is not clarified. The question is now very much most of the security guarantees will be done by the armed forces of Ukraine themselves. Then
Right.
there must be a European military presence in Ukraine.
Yes.
There's no need, I think, for a US military presence in Ukraine. I think the US is right about that. But there needs to be US backup for all this to make the deterrence credible because of standoff weapons and certain other military capabilities the Ukrainians and the Europeans simply do not have. And the Russians know it that they don't have it. So it's a credibility of deterrence. And I have the feeling the talks between the Europeans, the Ukrainians, and the US are very much about the question how does US backup look like? And maybe what will be the price for US backup? What do we have to do? What do we have to pay? How can we work this out? But it will be the Europeans, I think, will move forward with the European military presence in Ukraine, but it will be very difficult for them to move forward without any US backup.
Understood. I actually agree with you very much that the minerals deal is good, not only because it might mean more equipment for the Ukrainians, but I think Trump will be forced to try and deal with a recalcitrant Russia, who will have all sorts of demands, and in fact already do. And otherwise, we'll see just sort of Vladimir Putin come out as a recalcitrant sort of person that doesn't want a real stop to the fighting. But let's go on this security
Yeah, I think
assurances.
part of the Michael, I think part of the solution to this is that at any moment, because of the credibility of deterrence and the balance in all this, at any moment, the US has to appear strong and be strong in this.
That's right. I think that's right. So let's imagine for a second then that the United States is able to continue with some type of equipping of Ukraine into the future. Let's imagine that they're not getting in NATO, that there will
Mhm.
not be US peacekeepers, but maybe the United States will continue to equip the Ukrainians. Maybe we also back a European force with enablers. I keep hearing that there's certain critical enablers that
Yeah.
America has. Sometimes that's command and control, sometimes that's intelligence. But other than the French and the English, who have said that we will send troops there as peacekeepers, do you think Germany's new government would be open to doing this or not?
Well, as this discussion will be practically unfolding, I think the picture will change from this imaginary picture of thousands and thousands of soldiers with guns standing at the contact line into real military capabilities. And the real military capabilities, they are not about putting European soldiers along a contact line. They are more about providing a forward presence, a backup to the Ukrainian armed forces, who will be the forces who are at the front line and who are damn good at it. But it's also about providing an Air Force contingent. And if you look carefully, the British already talked about the Typhoon, for example. It's about maritime presence. Do not forget that in the western part of the Black Sea, it's about coastal defense and all of that. And I think once this gets more concrete in military capabilities, and Germany has a new government, it's impossible for Germany to not be part of this. Germany will have to be part of this.
Mm.
And that is something where I think Friedrich Merz will be an improvement over the last government in the sense of he will connect Germany in a very classic sense back with Northern Europe, with Central Eastern Europe. If you want to say so, it's the Helmut Kohl compass of Europe, where Germany always was a very, very good relationship with all the smaller countries in the North and Central Eastern Europe, and always had kind of an alliance it could build on and build majorities on in Europe. And I think Merz will get back to this, and this will help also in getting this military presence for Ukraine on the ground together with partners. And I can totally see that, for example, Germany also has a Eurofighter capability that is compatible with the Typhoon from the UK. So Air Force capabilities, providing them together could help. Also, the Taurus is compatible with the Gripen fighter from Sweden that could fit in with the connecting back to the north dimension. So I think there are practical possibilities, and I think the likelihood is extremely high that Germany will be part of this. At the
Right.
same time, I can understand every German, and that's my critique to Macron, when pushed about German troops in the week of an election. Of course, everybody will say no and stall the question until after the election. What can you
Yeah.
say?
Right.
Yeah, so it would be better to not have this kind of public wing flapping about those things just briefly before elections.
We're going to take a quick break, and we'll be right back with more of our discussion with Nico Lange.
Beacon Global Strategies is the premier national security advisory firm. Beacon works side by side with leading companies to help them understand national security policy, geopolitical risk, global technology policy, and federal procurement trends. Beacon's insight gives business leaders the decision advantage. Founded in 2013, Beacon develops and supports the execution of bespoke strategies to mitigate business risk, drive growth, and navigate a complex geopolitical environment. With a bipartisan team and decades of experience, Beacon provides a global perspective to help clients tackle their toughest challenges.
So tell us a little bit about Friedrich Merz. He's described as a lawyer. The headlines more or less say he's wanted to be chancellor for years, but then took a big break from politics. What kind of person is he? Describe his personality and his politics.
Well, I think what you have to know about him is that he started his political career as a member of the European Parliament, which is unusual for German national politicians. That's usually where you end your career. I'm joking now, but so he has strong European convictions. I already mentioned that he has this what I call the Helmut Kohl compass of Europe, building strong relationships to the Central Eastern countries, feeling responsibility that Germany is not only connected to what you would call the old Europe, but also to the new members of the European Union and of NATO. And I think he will bring that into his chancellorship very quickly, and I think it will help Germany. I think he is somebody with a very strong focus on competitiveness and on global competitiveness of the German economy. And I mean, we have now recession, I think, for the second year in a row. So it's the issue of the day, right? To become competitive again. And there are many issues attached to that. He has a reputation for having an interest in bringing the state quota down, reducing bureaucracy, making government lighter. Let's see how that will go. I mean, it's a coalition government in the end, and there will be compromises, but at least I think he has strong convictions when it comes to this. And he is what you can hear from his speeches, and he gave a speech on his foreign policy at the Kerber Foundation. I'm pretty sure it's also available in English if somebody's interested. He is convinced that there is a global competition going on between democracies and authoritarian systems.
Right.
And has a very clear conviction that Germany has to be part of a broader story defending democracy against authoritarian systems. And I think that explains also his positions vis-a-vis China and Iran and others. So I would expect improvement also on what I always thought was a very weak German Iran policy.
Yeah.
And Friedrich Merz is known to be friends with Benjamin Netanyahu. He is a very strong supporter of Israel. And it seems to me that's also something that will not hurt in the relationship with the current US administration, that he is a trusted partner of Israel. Yeah, that's I think what can be said. But to my mind, to have a focus on security, if you want to say so, a classic way of thinking about alliances, friends, and partners, and a focus on competitiveness. it could be a good development for Germany.
Well, that's great. Let me ask you one more on Ukraine, and then we'll return to maybe how the AfD performed in the terrorist attack that was in Munich. I want to hear about whether Elon Musk's offerings had any effect within Germany. But before we do that, let me ask you the big question. What is the best case scenario for some sort of quote unquote peace deal between Russia and Ukraine? Is it, if you looked at it plotting it along two poles, that a ceasefire is on the left and all the way to a peace agreement, an enduring, durable peace agreement on the right? Where would you put a possible agreement, and what would be the elements of it?
Well, I think key to the agreement is the question about a peace that can be built upon, not just a ceasefire. A ceasefire is not good enough. The experience with a ceasefire is it's just a break before Russia attacks again. And of course, at the current state, a ceasefire after such a long war is not good enough to bring the people back, to get investment into the country, to use the economic chances to develop Ukraine. Ukraine would be failing if the long-term security question is not clarified. So the best case scenario is to force Putin to stop his war of aggression and then immediately bring in all the ingredients you need for lasting solutions with a military presence of the Europeans and US backup. You could, along the way, find out that in parallel to what you already have, organizing a military presence in Ukraine with US backup could be done the cheapest way if you just make Ukraine a member of NATO. But there are, at the moment, the US and Germany are at the forefront of excluding this option.
Yeah.
But if you think about it in economic terms, that's the cheapest way of doing this and achieving that result. And also, if you ask investors who see the big chances in the Ukrainian economy, of course, for them, NATO membership, that's the security for the investment where they immediately understand, okay, now I go in.
Yeah, you're right.
And so we will see how this unfolds. But that is, it's doable without the NATO membership in the way I described. But it has to be done with this long-term security in mind, to make people return, to make people stay, and to get the economy back on track. Then there are great chances, I think, for everybody.
Okay, great.
And if this happens, I think Kiev will be the coolest city in Europe very quickly.
Yeah, it's great. Let me ask you this. So we've seen hundreds of articles about the rise of the AfD in Germany. We've seen even Elon Musk tweet on that they're the only ones that can truly save Germany. Explain for us how well they did during the election. What was their electoral appeal? And was their vote boosted by the terrorist attack that occurred in Munich right before the Munich Security Conference?
Well, I think the appeal of the AfD has certain elements. One of them certainly is the unhappiness with all previous governments. So it's a form of saying, okay, they do not understand what my needs are. I have to send them a message so that they understand. And that's largely focused around migration, where many people in Germany have the feeling it's too much and it brings a lot of problems, including crime and violence. And that's why incidents like the ones we had with the Christmas market in Magdeburg, but also the attack in Munich, they always just confirm what the AfD has been saying all along. And it certainly contributed to the electoral success. Friedrich Merz tried to counter this by taking the migration issue back into the political center. That's what he said about this. And that's where he said, okay, the centrist parties, they have to solve this. Then there will be less catalyst for the AfD. We will see if this is something that can be materializing in this time in government now. But I think the main catalyst for the AfD is migration and unhappiness with all previous governments. There is an element to the AfD that is making the AfD absolutely incompatible with the CDU. And that's unfortunate that many American friends do not understand this. But and they say, why are they not working together? And that's how I understood JD Vance and I mean Elon Musk was campaigning for the AfD with meeting Alice Weidel in a Twitter space. The fundamental convictions of the CDU, they are about friendship with France, uniting Europe, building a strong Europe with a strong Germany in it, and at the same time, a strong transatlantic relationship and a strong conviction of European integration and of NATO at the same time. AfD is against all that. They are fiercely anti-NATO. They are anti-American. That's why many Germans are irritated. It's like cognitive dissonance that the AfD, because of what Musk is saying, seem to be friends with America right now, because they used to be anti-American very strongly all the way.
Yeah.
So it must be a misunderstanding with some of our American friends when they think the AfD is a partner, because they aren't. And I mean, just look at the quotes, what they are saying about America and the Americans for a very long time. So that's a little bit odd to the German eye and ear that this is happening. But I mean, Trump in his tweet congratulated the CDU. I mean, it's a contrast between what Musk was doing and what was Trump was doing in his congratulations. We will see how this continues, because the AfD now is the strongest opposition force in parliament. They will certainly use that to work towards what they think is their chance to become the strongest party in 2029. But it depends not so much on ideology. I think this is more, it depends on the output of the new government. The government has to produce results, and then the AfD, I think, will be less of a problem. We will see.
Yeah, I got it. All right, last question. I know at one point Germans were probably a little annoyed that Elon Musk and other Americans were commenting on AfD. Maybe the JD Vance met with them. At the end of the day, did any of these American interventions in the minds of ordinary Germans have any effect on the performance of AfD in the election?
No.
Okay, good.
There's no measurable effect of that. There is, I think, a measurable effect of what I think unnecessary flurs of anti-Americanism in Germany. I have no interest in that. I think it's not good. On the other hand, I recommended everybody to calm down, because I knew many German, even politicians, who said, "Oh, I will go to the US and campaign for Kamala Harris." And that has been wrong all the way. So, but let's be honest now about this. Yeah. So if you thought that was fine, let's be relaxed about all this. As I said, my complaint about JD Vance's speech was not what he said. My complaint was we wanted to have a discussion about security interests and cooperation for security, and maybe how to tackle the bad guys like China together.
Yeah.
And not so much about observations about democracy in Europe. There are many people in Europe who also have observations about democracy in America. But I think it doesn't help us to solve our security problems if we are just sharing our observations.
Well, Nico, thank you so much for joining us on such an important week in your country. We would love to be able to come back to you as the government begins to form and things develop further in Ukraine. But in the meantime, thanks so much for joining us.
Thank you for inviting me. See you soon, Michael.
That was Nico Lange. I'm Michael Allen. Please join us next week for another episode of Intelligence Matters.
Intelligence Matters is produced by Steve Dorsey, with assistance from Ashley Berry. Intelligence Matters is a production of Beacon Global Strategies.